Now, the Acting Chief Executive and the Group Chief Financial Officer updates need to be heard and addressed, so I'll ask Phil and Mr. Gatefield, if he's here, to take the stand.
He most certainly is. I'll start. Kia ora koutou, and thanks for your time on this item. As you've just noted, you've got a comprehensive report and a presentation coming later in the agenda on FY23. So, and given, as you're well familiar with by now, the NZX disclosure things, we'll just keep this part of the discourse on organisation performance at a pretty high level, and I'll contain my enthusiasm accordingly. Maybe suffice to say that in this public section, that given the circumstances and what we've been through in recent years, the overall performance is quite pleasing. I'll leave it at that very high level comment. Specifically, in terms of the challenges in front of the organisation, we've hit savings targets in FY23. We've either solved for or have concrete plans for the savings challenges with us in this current year. I did want to speak very briefly to the staffing and staff costs aspects, partly because it's been in some media earlier this week. So it's important for you to know that to the period to the end of July, so the cumulative picture for FY23 in the first month of this year, given changes across the group, we are 420 FTEs down. That's a consequence of 335 redundancies and the balance being, as we've talked about previously, vacancies being retired as we manage by attrition to reduce the impact on people and mitigate some cost, but principally to mitigate the impact on people. You know, for anyone who's listening online who's been part of that challenging situation, I would just say, you know, thank you for your service and your understanding of that difficult situation. I mentioned, I want to be really clear that those are group figures, and there's a significant footprint in, for example, Auckland Transport and Tātaki, but likewise in the council parent organisation. I also might caution around numbers. We often have discussions about total staff numbers. Of course, it's a very, as it should be actually, in terms of being agile as an organisation, the numbers are quite fluid. So I'm giving you one picture in terms of the savings driven effects on the council group, but equally there are pressures the other way. You've heard a report from the recovery function today. There are getting upwards of 100 people involved in recovery now, 70 staff and a number of contractors, and as was reflected on, that's continuing to grow. And of course, as always in our world, you've got things that are driven off population growth, growth over time in the capital program. And I particularly want to mention as well that we were running things very lean through the last couple of years in recognition of the financial situation, as you would well expect. But we've been carrying probably an unsustainable number of vacancies in certain of the services. If Claudia was sitting here, she's still at the back of the room. Yes, she is. You know, I do note that We've been having some issues in terms of the ability to open some services because, you know, when you've got rostered staff and minimum staffing levels and what have you, if you've got any gaps, you can compromise your ability to actually open. So we've got to address that, and there'll be a pressure to kind of fix some of that situation going forward. And there are some other pressures we traversed last month. And I know it was a feature of some of the discussions yesterday as we did the scene setting around LTP. We've got some pressures that, frankly, I'm going to have to support us addressing in terms of animal management, dog, animal control officer numbers and such like, because of the significant growth in that space. That'll be something that comes through to you in due course and through the LTP. But we're still, 8-9 months away from that budget cycle, so there's some stuff that we're going to have to address sooner than that. Beyond that, we've had a good discussion about recovery today, but just reflecting on key things that have been a key focus in the last month. Clearly, the conclusion of negotiations with government, then leading into the design of this buyout scheme and the shaping of the Making Space for Water program. That's been a key focus. Secondly, the conduct of the airport share sale. I know that there are different views around that, but the simple fact is that you resolved to do it. It was a job to be done, and it was done. And a significant effort went in to achieve that, and particularly acknowledge Peter's support around that. Personally, just as an FYI, I'm on a tour around the region in terms of meeting with the local boards. Done 5 or 6 this month. There are more to come, and that's about recognising the unique governance arrangement we have and the fact that I've got to have some visibility and connect with them. So I'm on a program around that and meeting with staff as well. Next point, wanted to acknowledge, and there was some brief discussion about this yesterday in one of the LTP workshops, but I just want to acknowledge the manifesto and the work done by Mayor Wayne and his office in that regard. Out of that comes some work that is underway. The Mayor's Chief of Staff and I spent 2 days in Wellington at the end of last week, so we've had initial meetings with Ministry of Transport, Department of Internal Affairs, Housing and Urban Development, Ministry for the Environment, DPMC, MB, and done some other work with the Auckland Policy Office. The point here is that it's good to have clarity of policy direction and priorities articulated in this. We've got to be on the charge in terms of socialising that with government agencies in order that policy advice coming through to the incoming government understands first, and secondly, to the extent possible, support some of the directions and the advice coming through to central government. Now, there will be, there are already arrangements in place, or taking shape, I should say, for central government chief executives to come to Auckland as a group to further have a joined up discussion around this. DPMC representatives are here later next week, and there's also a nominated person to coordinate some of the government response to this, sorted out with Internal Affairs. So we're making good progress in that regard. Clearly, the upcoming election means that things are a little bit up in the air in terms of an ability to have political engagement at the moment, but that will need to be a focus post mid-October and sorting out some of the arrangements, and look forward to working with you on that engagement at a political level with Wellington to try and progress some of those priorities for Auckland. Just a couple of further things from me. I wanted you to be aware that when you resolved that the organisation would withdraw from Local Government New Zealand, there was also an acknowledgement, in fact a request, and then an acknowledgement from local boards that they would explore some level of engagement with LGNZ. I wanted to report back that we've had quite a number of discussions with local board chairs around that. I think they have quite wisely chosen not to try and replicate what would have otherwise been a membership arrangement formally with LGNZ. They did explore the question of associate membership and such like, but I'm letting you know that we are talking with LGNZ. We want a very simple arrangement that doesn't look like a membership arrangement, but which enables us to have a free exchange of our policy and research work, theirs and ours, that enables elected members to participate in some of the developmental opportunities. This is particularly true of local boards in terms of some of the training offerings that they have, and vehicles, mechanisms such as Te Maruata and the young elected member group and such like. Really simple, very light touch, and not trying to in any way undermine the position of the governing body in terms of withdrawing from LGNZ. So those discussions are pretty advanced, and we'll formalise them. Well, formalise them is overstating it, but we'll have a clear understanding with them about that. Megan couldn't be with us today to talk about any of the reforms. Suffice to say, maybe on her behalf, that they are continuing to progress. Key bits of enabling legislation were passed quite late in the day, water reform, for example. Clearly it's a difficult situation with the election coming up and people speculating as to whether certain of those reforms will survive in the longer term. Staff need to recognise, however, that the legislation's in place, the direction formally hasn't changed, so we've got to keep faith with that. To that end, we've had ongoing discussions with the National Transition Unit and the new Northern Waitamaki water entity. We've been continuing to resolve all of the issues such as boundary issues around stormwater infrastructure between Transport ourselves in terms of Healthy Waters and the new water entity, and a number of other things. We'll reach a point where I should mention as well that this is difficult space, right? Because we've got quite a number of staff involved in this who themselves sense the uncertainty here, and it's really important that we keep things sort of calm and stable. We don't want through this exercise to lose a whole lot of good people because of uncertainty. So some care's being taken around that. I think, Your Worship, I will leave it there and hand over to Peter.
Thank you, Phil. Our first point I'd note is that we have a wealth of information on last year's performance in the confidential section, and that's prior to release to the NZX tomorrow, so there's quite a deep dive we can go into on last year's performance. I'd like to start with talking about the LTP process. So I'd describe the long-term plan 24-34 as being on track, full stop. I would put the caveat in that we are taking a different approach to support political direction and decision making, and this alongside our normal rigorous audit processes means that there is added pressure across the group to meet the constrained timelines that we always seem to have. As of mid-September, so this doesn't include yesterday, for example, there have been 4 well-attended budget committee briefings and 2 workshops, including 2 briefing sessions for local board members. These so far have covered the overall LTP process, legal and audit requirements, financial context, climate reporting, performance measures framework, infrastructure strategy, asset management, rating matters, and the proposed engagement approach, so quite intensive. There have also been online sessions and follow-up meetings provided to staff across the group to support the preparation of information and advice, to provide further insight to support your decision making. There has been ongoing engagement with the Mayor's office and support provided for political working parties so they can feed into the process, as well as our regular communications with Audit New Zealand to keep them across what's happening. As Phil has indicated, the Auckland International Airport Limited partial share sale went through as signalled in the annual budget. Auckland Council sold 103.1 million shares on the 31st of August 2023. The Council achieved a weighted average sale price of $8.11 per share compared to the NZX market closing price on the same day of $7.81. As such, the sale proceeds were $833 million, with the sale proceeds being used to pay down debt maturing shortly thereafter over September and October. Also in September, we raised a domestic green bond issue. That was for $300 million over 5 years and was a retail green bond. This was our first NZ dollar retail bond since 2021, and it had good engagement across retail, asset managers and banks, as well as some offshore investor participation. It was pleasing to see the degree of support for that. The proceeds will be allocated to finance eligible green assets in accordance with Council's updated sustainable finance framework. Turning now to the financial performance for the period ended 31 August 2023, and starting with Auckland Council Group. Capital investment, even at the start of the year, was 94% of budgeted delivery, with 475 million spent. That's 28 million below budget, and this was mainly due to the varied commencement timing of the projects at the start of the new financial year compared to the budget phasing that was expected. Some of the key areas of capital underspend were Auckland Transport asset management projects and climate action transport targeted rate funded projects. Watercare's flood corrective project works were also delayed. These projects were still in the design phase and are not expected to incur significant spend until later in the financial year. The residential smart meters project was below budget due to supply chain challenges, but they've since been resolved, and the project will ramp up in the next couple of months when the meter stocks arrive. Net direct expenses at the group level were 19 million, that's 11% favourable to budget. The biggest overs and unders were fees and user charges revenue. This was 6 million over budget, mainly due to building consents, licences and permits revenue, which had higher processing volumes than budgeted. This was partly offset in a negative sense by water revenues, port storage and demurrage, which were both under budget. Employee benefit costs were 1 mil higher than budget, which was mainly because of the timing of the implementation of the restructuring, which has been spoken to, and lower labour capitalisation, which meant that that labour could not go to the capital projects and budgeted. Other direct expenditure was 12 million, or 3% lower than budget, and that's mainly due to less repair and maintenance expenses than budgeted due to project delays. If we take a quick look at Auckland Council Parent, rather than the group view, capital expenditure was 2 million below budget, and that's due to the timing of the delivery of the Corporate Support Services WorkSmart program. The key WorkSmart deliverables this year being the Auckland Emergency Management Relocation and Albany Logistics Centre. Net direct expenditure was 27 million favourable to budget. A big ticket variance there was the fee and charges, which I've already talked to in the building consents licences area. Direct expenditure was 12 million lower than budget, and there's two key elements of that. The 6 million mentioned that was favourable in repairs and maintenance because of project delays, and also employee benefits at the parent level, which was 6 million favourable, mainly from vacancies, particularly in areas that require specialist skills and are hard to fill, such as regulatory and ICT. So I'll leave it there. As I said, there is a wealth of material that we can discuss around last year's performance, and I'll now hand over to our Group Chief Economist.
Thank you, Peter. Your Worship, good afternoon, councillors. The Treasury released its pre-election update on the 12th of September. The outlook is for economic activity to slow and unemployment to rise through into 2024 as higher interest rates dampen demand and inflation and a subdued global environment weighs on exports. An economic upturn is not forecast to begin until 2025. There is considerable uncertainty to that outlook, and the Treasury highlights the risk of stronger demand and persistent high inflation, so that interest rates have to remain higher for longer. GDP data out just last week shows economic activity was higher in the June quarter than had been expected. Also, net migration for the year to July is estimated at a record 96,000 people nationally. Now, that gain helps ease labour shortages, but it also adds to demand, including for housing. While the Reserve Bank is expected to hold the official cash rate at 5.5% next week, views are split as to the possibility of a November hike of 25 basis points to further dampen demand. CPI inflation out next month will show the extent to which inflation is coming down, and that will be critical for that decision. Returning to the pre-election fiscal outlook, it's much weaker than forecast at the budget in May, with lower tax revenue and higher expenses for the government. As a result, the operating deficit is forecast to peak at 11 billion rather than 7 billion in fiscal year 24, with a return to surplus delayed until fiscal year 26-27. Crown debt will peak a bit higher as a result. So this all means that an incoming government will face a more constrained set of options. Prioritisation will be needed to make the best use of limited resources, and the Treasury will likely expect evidence of benefits and costs of proposals. And a similar focus on value for money, of course, can also help inform your decision-making for Auckland Council's long-term plan. I'd also like to highlight the IMF's report on New Zealand, released late last month. It cites the steps Auckland has taken to increase our housing supply as having helped the recent downward correction in house prices, alongside higher interest rates, of course. By that, the IMF is referring to Auckland's unitary plan, which has allowed for more flexible use of some urban land, with some more development opportunities being available, then housing suppliers better able to respond to demand, and of course buyers have more choice. And so this has enabled a surge that we've seen in Auckland in new dwellings since 2017, with research finding that more homes have been able to be built than otherwise would have been the case, with strong preferences for locations closer to jobs and transport. However, the IMF is warning that a sustained improvement in housing affordability will depend critically on land supply, zoning and infrastructure investment to support more homes being built. And of course, this underlines the importance of your decision-making to finalise Auckland Council's future development strategy. Thank you. Hand back to Peter, or to your Worship.
Okay, Councillor Sayers, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Peter, for the update. I'm sorry I haven't sent this question to you in advance, but you might, and if you can't answer it now, obviously you can just come back to me, Peter. But it's just around the regional fuel tax, kind of consolidated money there, and just the movement that we've seen over the last year in terms of what projects have been delivered and how that fund's being utilised, and are we on track? Yep.
Thank you for the question. I can't answer it now, but it is set out in the documents that you're shortly to see in confidential. One of the elements that we have to report on is the use of the targeted rates, and the RFT and the progress over the last year is included explicitly within those documents.
Councillor Walker, please.
A couple of questions. One for you, Phil. One of the contentions that was put to us around the opting out of the LGNZ was this discount or arrangement around power. Do we resolve that? Electricity, street lights.
Yes, no, I'm aware. Honestly, I can't answer that question here, but I'll look into it for you and report back.
Be nice to know. I'm assuming we negotiated something. The other question I've got just goes to the officers, and you probably won't be able to answer it, but obviously immigration impacts on Auckland, particularly if the immigrants determine to live here. Do we actually have any data on how many people are choosing to reside in Auckland that come to New Zealand? Do we collect any information on that through REMU?
Through the Chair, Councillor, it's a good question. We'll have data out next month on the regional estimates of population growth for Auckland. But looking back through history, we've found that Auckland has been a favourable destination for migrants when they're arriving in New Zealand, and we would expect to attract at least around half. And so I would expect the numbers when they're out to show that Auckland has probably been growing.
Sure. So my question is around whether we have any real data or whether we're just guessing. If we're just guessing, that's fine. And similarly, around housing affordability, do we track pricing and the like in the market to determine how many affordable houses there are in Auckland or not?
We do have measures of housing affordability in general, and we do have measures of the size of what's known as the intermediate housing market, which is those that are on lower incomes to the extent they've got purchasing power to buy houses. We do have information on that. We can supply that to you.
And we're tracking that on an ongoing basis.
Yes, there's analysis that can be made available to you.
Okay, thanks.
Deputy Mayor Simpson, please.
Thank you, and thanks, Peter. And again, another apology for not sending you the question first, because I think it's one for Craig. But I did notice that we were over on the fees and charges and the consenting. And I just wondered whether that was because people are consenting for repairs for their homes that have been damaged in the flood, or do you think that's a normal over for consenting for new builds? Or just normal, you know? And I apologise.
Craig Hobbs is online. You might like to answer that, Craig.
Hey, Craig, you're on mute.
Tell him to turn his thing down.
Put your microphone down, Craig.
Hey.
The joys of online meetings. My apologies. Kia ora koutou. Thank you for the question, Councillor. The consenting, as you're aware, consenting volumes have dropped, but complexity rate remains high. So we're still getting pretty good income from consenting applications, even though the numbers are down. We've also changed our business model a little bit. We've been able to redeploy people into the likes of inspections and code of compliance certificates and BWOF work. So we've managed to keep our revenue high doing other business that we needed to do anyway, but basically diverting people into more productive roles at the moment as consent volumes drop. So hopefully that answers your question.
Respectfully, no. What I was asking whether you thought that there were a lot of consents coming from homes that had been damaged in the floods.
Right. No, there hasn't been a huge amount. In fact, we've been surprised by how low the numbers have been. I can't give you the numbers directly, but I'll come back to you on that. It is slowly growing, and we anticipate there will obviously be more to come. A lot of the works that were required through as a result of storm damage are actually, they don't need a consent. Yeah. So it's really only the major works, and a lot of that still has to be done.
Good, thanks. Shane, are you listening? Sorry, Councillor.
Good answer. Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, just as an acknowledgement of how sad my life is, every month this stuff comes out, I always jump to the debt area, wanting to see where our cash and term deposits over 90 days and so on. But I notice it's not been in this report and the last, and it's taking away one of the small joys in my life. Are we going to start putting the debt stuff back into this or not?
Yes, we are, Councillor. As soon as we've released the NZX tomorrow with the closing debt position, we'll be able to continue putting that debt figure back in, and one of those joys will return to your life.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I do know it's a sad life, but...
Well, that's the joys of having listed debt. You see, it keeps that secret. Councillor Watson.
Thanks. Just a couple of questions on the comments in respect of the sale of the airport shares. So 833 million, I think it was, you said. Did all of that go in to pay down debt?
Yes, all of it is going down to pay off debt over September and October. Now, the reason I've put that qualifier on it is the cost effectiveness of breaking some of our shorter term aspects of borrowing, but yes, it will be paying down debt.
Okay, so during the consultation period, we put up the figure of 87 million being the saving in annual interest costs that was contingent on the full sale of the shares. So what did that cost savings and annual interest then amount to with the 830 million? Do we have a figure for that?
We could calculate a figure for that based on the amount of debt that we've paid off. It's probably better to do that as part of a report back once we've paid off the debt that we've been able to.
Okay. One of the other things we said there in the consultation document was that we plan to borrow no more than 75 million of additional debt for this year. Is that still the case?
I would have to go back and refresh myself around the consultation document, but that would also be dependent upon the other aspects of the consultation document being resolved upon and directed as well. And I'm not sure that the consultation document in its entirety ended up in that space. That would be the decisions that were taken by governing body at the end of June that would determine the debt that was required for this current year.
Okay, so I can just quickly read you the bit in the document. Borrowing no more than 75 million of additional debt so that we can cope with any future financial uncertainty. So that was what was written down there.
If I recall, that 75 million is related to the prudent use of debt and our ability to continue to move towards fully funding of depreciation. That element of balancing the budget was changed during the end of June governing body session.
Okay, so in terms of the overall debt profile, then I'm just looking at one of these workshop papers we got back probably towards the end of last year, and I'm trying to reconcile it with what we've just received recently in terms of overall debt, which I think I saw in some document yesterday was to plan to go up to 12.6 billion. Is that overall debt greater or lesser than it was before the sale of the airport shares? So, I guess my reading of everything that we did with respect of the airport shares and the communications with the public was that whatever it ended up being would just come off, and the debt would then, benefit as a consequence of that, the overall debt. But what I see in these figures is the debt just continue to climb, and in terms of that 12.6 billion figure will be considerably more than what was anticipated.
I would suggest that we shouldn't be talking about confidential information in this session. With due respect, the debt position will be dependent on the decisions that governing body make moving forward on their long-term plan decisions. The sale of the airport share has gone to pay off debt and will reduce what the debt otherwise would have been without that sale of debt. That's probably the best way that I can explain it through you, Chair.
Okay, so without...
it's a fair question, though. I think that when we get into the confidential thing in the next month, we'd like to have quite clearly what was the saving as a result of that, not waffled around by how much it could have gone up from other things. We do make decisions periodically which make things worse. We have floods, the reason I agree to pay for those, but it should be quite clear to do a sum that shows exactly what the saving came out of that. And I think that's a good question to ask, and I want to know exactly the answer myself.
Okay, thanks for that. And I guess when I bring it up in terms, and I'm going, and that's why I'm quoting largely from the consultation material, which is on the public record, of course, and really the notion that was communicated to the public in terms of interest payments, and the beneficial effect on the overall interest payment that selling the shares would have. So I guess what I'm ultimately looking to land on are our interest payments for this next year going to be less or greater than they were before the airport share was sold overall, the overall figure. So we were told interest payments last year were 464 million, likely to hit 500 million for this year. So as a consequence of those airport shares, has that figure gone down?
I'm absolutely sure it has, but we will have that figure clear next month. I want that as well. But we have to realise that every time that we put our hand up and vote in favour of buying back 700 houses without putting up rates, axiomatically, that will rise, but it wouldn't rise from the base where it was, so we do save money. And nevertheless, it will be made abundantly clear so that all can see. And I'm right with you in asking that question. Okay? Councillor Lee?
What is the level of dividend expected back from Auckland International Airport Limited now, given the altered circumstances?
Risery is the answer.
I wouldn't like to comment on anything other than publicly available information, obviously, and I don't have access to anything other than what is publicly available, just to put that on the record so that there's no issues with NZX. Some of the aspects that impacted on the timing of the sale was the need for investors to consider price-setting event for the Commerce Commission's determination of the weighted average cost of capital for the airport share, and the airport, Auckland International Airport's result announcement, and within that result announcement, its dividend policy, which changed downwards, and also its outlook for future revenues and capital. So all of those aspects came into the timing of the sale and allowed the investors to have a fully informed view, so that we had a contestable process and fully informed investors when they came into that process. That process was moving 91 times daily volume, so we needed all the investors to be fully informed so that we could move 91 days in one single transaction, and at the 3.8% premium that we did. In terms of the dividend policy, because Auckland International Airport Limited has reduced its dividend policy, the expectations for ourselves with our current 11% share and for other investors is that there is less dividends that is going to be paid out than was initially expected, even during the period of the consultation document.
When you dump a big parcel of shares, you lower the price. Can I just confirm with you that at this point in time, no debt has been repaid from the proceeds of the share sale? Is that correct?
No, that is incorrect.
So debt has been repaid from the airport share sales at this time?
The comment I made was that the airport share sales were being used to pay off debt over September and October to be economically efficient when the tranches of debt that we have roll off so that we don't incur break fees. So we're doing the best approach to paying off the debt, and that is what the debt has been used for. It's already impacted on our net debt position.
Some debt has been repaid or hasn't been repaid? Can you just confirm that, please?
I think I've been quite clear already. Thank you.
I'm not getting. I want an answer from you, please. Has some debt been repaid or what? It's a simple question.
I said yes, and the answer remains yes.
No, all I can say is 100 million has been repaid using that money. At the moment, the balance will be paid over the next month. It's lined up with debt maturing over the month.
That was helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
Just to make this clear, have I got this right? The money is going to be used to pay off debt. We pay off debt each time a tranche of debt becomes mature. If you pay it before you mature, you have to pay a fee to break that. So far, a chunk of money, debt has become mature and we've paid that off. And the next time a chunk of money of debt becomes mature, we will pay that off. It's just like in your house. If you pay it off early, they give you a fee. So think of it like that. It's quite clear.
Very clear question, yes or no, and you've given most of the answer. That could have been given before. Thank you.
I accept that.
But the question was answered earlier.
Yes, it was. But we'll have little...
The future tense was used, inadvertently perhaps, but the future tense will go to pay off debt rather than has paid off debt or partially paying off debt. It's not clear. All I'm asking for, and I'm entitled for some clarity.
Entitled. You're entitled, and he has told you, yes, some has been paid off, and when the next tranche comes available, it will be paid off.
It's a simple question, just if it needs to be drawn out too bad. We spend a lot of time answering questions.
We do, and I must admit...
Look,
I take
Mr Mayor, we're all accountable, and these guys are accountable too. It's a democracy. That's how it works.
Finger wandered off course. Good questions. I think we eventually got answers, but we could practice brevity. We're now to situation... Oh, Councillor Hills has got it.
Kia ora, just on that, following on from that, could we, through the confidential, have a clear picture of the unders and overs on that? Because obviously consultation, what was sold in the end was quite different to the options on the consultation material, and also clearly where the signal post our decision, or no, before our decision was the dividends are going to pay off, and the dividends forecast are far less than we originally got told from Auckland Airport.
That's another thing that
so could that
should have been given much more clearly.
Could
they
that
have publicly told us what they're going to be next year, which should have been given as the answer to the first question. So we will learn to be a bit more clear.
I guess just in monetary figures, that would be good. But the other question I had on the, that's great work on the green bonds. Could I just have a brief update to how we will get through the long-term plan a surety that we will have all the risk built into what we have to achieve climate or emissions wise to keep that lower cost interest through those green bonds, so to keep the agreed position we signed up for? Sorry, probably didn't, but I know we have to do a certain number of things as a council to, otherwise it will cost us.
Okay, thank you for the question and the clarification on some of the airport sale wrap, and I think that will be part of what comes back to governing body, is that fulsome look at the airport share sale, what was achieved and how it compared to what was initially expected. With respect to your second question, I believe that relates to the sustainability linked loans, and the three dimensions in there that move the margin of that rate up or down depending on whether we achieve it or not. Including things such as our greenhouse gas emission targets and our how diverse our procurement processes are. It's those types of aspects within there. Within the next session, I believe we do have something in volume 4 of the climate report that talks to some of those elements.
Okay, and so is the green bond release, the 300, it's in the public agenda,
Yep.
is that just linked to those projects? That's the only...
That is linked to our green asset portfolio, which is well in hand and we have adequate amounts of.
Thank you, Councillor Hills. Councillor Fletcher, please. And we're going to go into secrecy.
Thank you. And if this is a question that could be better posed in the next section, I'm particularly anxious to know that we haven't lost a lot of knowledge in the whole library area amongst some of our senior staff. Can I be given some comfort and assurance that the importance of that institutional knowledge has not been lost in such an important area for the Auckland Council?
I think the answer's no, it hasn't been lost, but Claudia?
So kia ora koutou, and thank you for the question. No, so we try very hard to make sure that we retain our staff. And within our libraries and information services, we have very, very long staff tenure, which is also a real advantage. So with all of the changes that we make, including changes where we potentially might propose staff reductions, we really also try to redeploy wherever possible so that we minimise any knowledge-based impacts. People do retire though over time, so those things will naturally happen. So therefore it's also important that we have a good succession plan. Thank you.
Okay, that seems to be in it. It's been proposed and mover and a seconder to accept that stuff there. Got two? Yeah. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. We've now got consideration of extraordinary items, of which there are none known. Please don't find any. Next thing is... Well, it's an extraordinary item, but I think what we'll do is we'll move the motion to exclude the public for the usual reasons. Moved by Baker and seconded by Dalton, and now we're all those in favour of being secret, please say aye. Aye. Conference.
And we'll need to adjourn now.
We need to adjourn for a plumbing stop for a couple of minutes while the ladies reset the computers.
That's